Hello and welcome to the Ojo Show, where we talk strategy, tips and honest advice on how to play the most popular casino games. I'm Dan Grant and I've been playing casino games and working in the industry for 20 years, so I've been on both sides of the table. In this podcast series, I want to share everything I've learned to get you a fairer deal, the lowest house edge possible, and hopefully some better results too. Okay, so far we've been uncovering the mysteries of blackjack. Now it's time to go under the hood of another legendary casino game, Roulette. Now, whereas blackjack has enough skill and strategy to keep you learning and improving for years, roulette is pure luck, right? Well, not quite. Yes, it's basically about guessing the right number that's going to come up, but there's much more to playing roulette well than closing your eyes, picking a number and hoping for the best. In this episode, we're going to discover what roulette is and how to play the game. Now, if you've never played or you're just starting out, I'm going to give you some useful tips on how and when to bet and some mistakes to avoid. But even if you've spun the wheel thousands of times, you might just uncover something about the classic game that changes the way you play. Let's get cracking. So, where has roulette come from and what are the basic rules? Well, roulette's arguably the first of the most popular casino games ever invented. It appeared in France in around the 1800s and it really hasn't changed at all since then. Roulette is basically a game of random numbers, a bit like the lottery or Keno, except here the numbers are chosen by physics, so spinning a ball around a wheel. The aim of the game is to predict and bet on what number's going to come up next. As well as single numbers, you can bet on all sorts of weird and wonderful combinations, and the payout odds range from as big as 35-1 right down to even money. The most important feature of the game is the roulette wheel itself. It's got 36 or 37 numbers around the base of the wheel, depending on the version of the game that you play. The croupier starts spinning the wheel one way and then spins a little white ball around a track at the top of the wheel in the opposite direction. Now, as the speed of the ball decreases, it travels down towards the numbered pockets, probably hits a few metal diamonds, as they're called, along the way to give it a bit more randomness, will bounce around the pockets for a little while and then stop in one of the numbers. Next to the wheel is a roulette table with a grid of numbers and also other bet types. Now, before the croupier spins the wheel, you'll have a minute or so to place your bets on the roulette table. In land-based casinos, you bet with special roulette chips or cash chips. And if you're playing online, well, you just tap the screen to place your bets. So that's roulette in a nutshell. Easy game. But playing online is super simple. Playing in a real casino takes a bit more practice. When I visited a casino for the first time, I was a bit nervous about rocking up to a busy roulette table. There were lots of people around. I didn't know where to stand, who to ask for advice, how to even get chips, and what bets were available. So let's look at all of those things so that you're better off than I was when you head to the casino for your first game of roulette. So what does a regular game of roulette look like and how do you actually play? Well, first you've got to choose a table and get your chips. Roulette tables, even online ones, have table limits. Those are minimum and maximum bets for each bet type. Once you've figured out your total bankroll for the session, that's the amount of money you're happy to spend and the amount you're comfortable betting per spin, then you need to choose a table with limits that match your budget. In an online casino, you bet with cash chips straight from your balance. In a real casino, it works a little differently. So you can bet with cash chips, like a £5 chip, and I would often go up to a roulette table for maybe even one or two spins to see if my luck's in. I might put a £5 cash chip, which is usually the smallest denomination in a casino, on a single number or an outside bet. But generally speaking, croupiers prefer you to use a set of dedicated roulette chips that don't have any actual value in terms of taking them to the cashier, but they do have a unique colour so they know which players have placed which bets. So if you're planning to stay in the casino for a while, or if you want to place lots of bets, and especially if you want to play for lower stakes, then you need to exchange your banknotes or your cash casino chips for coloured roulette chips. Once the croupier's given you your stack of coloured roulette chips, you need to wait for the next betting round to open. A single round of roulette lasts a couple of minutes, and it starts when the croupier's cleared the table of previous bets and paid everyone out. You'll have about 30 to 45 seconds to place your bets before the croupier says no more bets. If at any time you can't reach a number or an area of the betting board, just ask the croupier to place the bet for you, and just put your chips on the felt and they'll take them off you. Once the ball has stopped, after the wheel has spun, the croupier will place a little see-through marker called a dolly on the winning number, and they will pay everyone out. Usually they'll pay you out in the same colour chips you have bet with. If you hit a particularly big win and you want some or all of it paid out in cash chips, just ask the croupier and they will be happy to oblige. Now, once you've finished your session, if you still have any of those coloured roulette chips left, don't walk away from the table with them because they'll do you no good. Ask the croupier to cash you up. They'll give you cash chips that you can then take to the cage and exchange for real cash. So that's how a game of roulette typically works. Pick a table, place your bets. It's that simple. But not all roulette tables are the same, as we're about to find out. So why aren't all roulette tables the same? Well, there are three general types of roulette: European, French, and American. And all they all use the same roulette wheel and offer pretty much the same bet types, but there are some key differences to look out for, and they can have a pretty big impact on your results. European and American roulette are the dominant variants across the world. European roulette uses numbers 0 to 36, and American roulette uses numbers 0 to 36, but also it has a double 0, so that's a second green 0. European and American roulette wheels also use a different sequence of numbers around the wheel. So when I play roulette in the UK at a European roulette table, my favourite number is 14, and I know that if the ball misses 14 by one number either side, it's going to land in 20 or 31. On an American wheel, that would be two totally different numbers. But aside from the order of the numbers on the wheel and the existence of the double 0, American roulette is identical to European roulette. So what about French roulette? Well, that is just a minor variation of European roulette. It's the same in pretty much every way, except for a special rule which applies when you place even money bets and the ball lands in 0. So one version of this rule is called la partage, and you'll get half your stake back if the ball lands in green 0. In the other version, called en prison, your bet rolls over to the next spin, and if you win, you don't actually double your money, but you do get your full stake back. So both versions of that rule essentially halve the house edge for any even money bet, which is pretty handy. So what version of roulette should you play? Well, if you're playing in a live casino, you probably won't have the choice because they tend to stick to whatever the local variety is. In UK casinos, for example, you will only find European roulette tables. But if you play online, you'll have the choice of European, American, or even French, and you might prefer a roulette table that uses 2 green 0s, but you should be aware that the house edge in American roulette is twice as big. So that extra 0 comes at a price. French roulette is exactly the same as European roulette, except for the rules that I talked about. So the house edge is much less for those even money bets, but all other things being equal, that's the availability of tables, the stake limits and so on, go for the roulette table which has the lowest house edge, especially if you like to bet on red or black, odd or even, and so on. Now that I've mentioned house edge, is a good time to look at that aspect of roulette because it's pretty important so that you understand the cost of playing the game and also the reason why roulette is not a beatable game in the long run. So, how about the house edge in roulette? What does it mean? Well, European roulette has a house edge of about 2.7%. That means that on average, for every £100 you bet, in theory, you should get about £97.30 back. But house edges and return to players, or RTPs, are theoretical, and you have to play an awful lot of spins for that luck to even out. The house edge in roulette isn't some factor that's programmed into the software like a slot machine. So it's more like in sports betting, where the odds you're given for any particular bet type are slightly lower than the true probability of it happening. So take a single number, for example. If we bet £1 on a single number and win, we get a payout of 35 to 1. But there are actually 37 numbers on a European roulette wheel, so the true odds of picking a single number are 1 in 37, or in betting terms, 36 to 1. So if there was a roulette table with no house edge, the payout odds for a single number would actually be 36 to 1, not 35 to 1. So that difference, there's your 2% house edge. It's the same for even money bets like red or black. The true probability of red or black coming up is not 50%. It's actually about 48.6% because of the green zero. So the payout odds are even money or 1-to-1. So in other words, doubling your money. But the difference between 50% betting odds and 48.6% payout odds, there's your 2.7% casino margin or house edge. There's no getting away from it. Every available bet on the roulette table has that house edge built into the odds. Some bets are actually better value than others. And because there are 2 green zeros on an American roulette table, the house edge is actually over 5%. So be careful what game type you choose. In French roulette, for example, some bets, those even money bets, have a house edge of just 1.35% because of the la partage and en prison rules. So it pays to know your bet types and your house edges. So what can we actually bet on? Well, now let's look at the different roulette bet types. All right, the most important part of roulette is knowing what you can bet on. When most people think of roulette, the bets that come to mind are single numbers and of course red and black. And yeah, single numbers are the most exciting bet in roulette because you're trying to predict exactly where the ball will land, and because you get the biggest payout odds. As for red and black, it's an iconic bet because apart from zero, roulette numbers are either red or black, so roulette is associated with those colours. It's also easier to win with an even money bet because you've got around a 48% chance. There are 10 different standard bets you can make in roulette, plus a bunch more advanced bets that we sometimes call special bets or racetrack bets or even exotics. On a roulette table, the main betting layout is divided into 2 areas. One is a grid of numbers, and the other is sections around the outside of the grid. All of the bets you can make within the grid are called inside bets, and everything outside is called an outside bet. Inside bets allow you to bet on 1, 2, 4, or 6 numbers that are near each other on the grid with just one chip. Now, bear in mind that on the grid, the numbers are laid out from 0 right up to 36 in order, which is different to the wheel where they're in a completely different sequence and a kind of a fairly random sequence at first glance. So even though you might want to place a chip between 2 numbers on the table, those numbers will be quite far apart on the wheel. The payout odds for inside bets are all related to the odds for a single number, which is 35-1. So if you want to bet on 2 numbers with a single chip, you'll get roughly half those odds, so you get 17-1. If you want to bet on 4 numbers, the odds will be 8-1, and so on. A single number bet is sometimes called a straight up bet. 2 numbers is called a split because your chip will split the 2 numbers on the board. You can bet on 3 numbers in a row across the grid, and that's called a street. You can bet on 4 numbers in a square, that's called a corner bet. And you can bet on 6 numbers across the grid, that's called a line bet. It's easier to visualize these bet types than listen to me, so click on the link in the description and check out the diagram on the roulette table and you'll see how all of these inside bets work. Inside bets are the long shots that don't come in too often, but they pay out nicely when they do. Outside bets are full of players who want a better chance of winning, even if it means you don't make much money when you do win. Now, there are 3 types of outside bet: columns, dozens, and even money bets. Now, columns, and you'll see the bet for columns at the end of each of the 3 main columns on the grid, they let you bet on 12 numbers. There are 3 columns to choose from, and you have a roughly 1 in 3 chance of winning, and the payout odds are 2-1 on your money. If you like the sound of betting on 12 numbers with a single chip, you can also bet on what we call dozens or thirds. You can find these underneath the number grid, and they're usually called first 12, second 12, and third 12. Just like the column bet, a dozen pays 2-1 if you win. But why would you bet on a dozen rather than a column? Well, with a column, you can bet on every third number, whereas with a dozen, you bet on a group of numbers, for example, 1-12 or 13-22. The last category of outside bets is called even money bets. This is basically your chance to bet on half the wheel and double your money. There are 3 types of even money bet. Red or black is the most famous, odd or even, and high or low, where the wheel is divided into 1-18 and 19-36. Now, usually roulette table limits are different for outside and inside bets, so make sure you check the rules before you play. Single numbers have the lowest minimum bet. Usually it's 50p or £1 for single numbers in a land-based casino, and even money bets might have a £5 minimum. So that's what to bet on. But given how many options there are, how do you choose what to bet on that's right for you? And are there any ways to improve your chances of winning? Let's talk about roulette strategy. So I'm going to dedicate a whole episode to roulette strategies because it's a really interesting area, mainly because the internet's full of terrible advice that could cost you money. So I'm going to give you the truth about roulette strategies and make sure you have all the information at your disposal before you try and beat the wheel. There's no way to consistently win in roulette. You cannot reliably make money playing roulette because of a house edge. You might think that if you see 6 reds in a row, you can start betting on blacks because one of them's bound to come up eventually. You might think you've seen a bias where the wheel favours a certain section, or maybe a croupier who spins the ball in such a way that it lands in the same region of the wheel. But trust me, whatever patterns you see, whatever hunch you have about the numbers that have come up and the numbers that may come up next, it's impossible to predict. And it's impossible to find a bet that guarantees that you consistently make a profit. There are lots of roulette strategies around, some of which have been around for over 100 years. The most famous is the martingale roulette strategy. This involves placing even money bets and doubling your bet size every time you lose. Doesn't sound very clever, does it? Well, the theory behind the martingale strategy is that eventually you will hit a winner and you'll be back in profit. But there's a problem. Anyone who's played lots of roulette will tell you that it's hardly impossible to see 5 or 6 reds in a row, for example. If you play online roulette, you get in many more spins per hour, which means you see a bigger sample size, and you may see things that seem impossible to you. You'll eventually see 7 or 8 reds or blacks in a row. So you need a big bankroll to handle those kind of losing streaks. The problem with this martingale roulette strategy is that if you start off betting £1, for example, by the 7th consecutive loss, your next bet is £128. And if you win, all you're doing is winning back your losses and getting a £1 profit. So almost all roulette strategies are betting strategies. They are about how much to bet if you have just won or lost, not what numbers you actually need to bet on. Some strategies tell you to bet smaller after you've lost. Some tell you to bet bigger after a win. But in terms of the numbers that come up, roulette is pure luck. There are some good betting strategies, or at least better betting strategies, that can generate a bigger profit if you get lucky in a session. And I'll do a podcast about some of those soon. But all roulette strategies still require you to get lucky. There's no secret sauce that helps you predict what numbers are coming up next. That's in the lap of the gambling gods. So if you fancy trying a roulette strategy, just be aware that there's no guarantee that you're going to win. If you do, you got lucky. If you don't, well, you may have got unlucky, but ultimately you're not beating the house edge. And the most important thing with any roulette strategy is bet sensibly. Have an idea of your budget. Don't let it get out of hand, and play safe. So that's roulette for you, using the laws of physics to choose random numbers. Now, you know everything there is to know about how the game works and how to get started. If you want to learn more about roulette, go deeper into roulette strategies, find out if the most popular myths are true or just fake news, or read some stories about famous players who beat the wheel for millions, head to playojo.com/blog/roulette. Now, don't forget, roulette is a game of risk, so pick your budget, manage your time well, play safe, and you'll have more fun. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time for more advice and tips on the world's most popular casino games.
The Casino.